We booked flights to meet their family for Christmas. I smiled, nodded, played along, knowing I was about to end it all. At 3 a.m., I whispered the truth. I don't love you. They laughed like I'd just killed every plan we ever made. They left with a suitcase and silence. Now, 2 years later, I've rebuilt a life without them. And the last thing they said still haunts me. I hope you find what you're looking for. I never thought I would become the kind of person who keeps secrets. Growing up, I prided myself on honesty. Brutal honesty sometimes. My mother used to say my tongue would get me in trouble one day, that some truths were better left unspoken. But I didn't understand what she meant until that cold November evening when everything I thought I knew about myself came undone. 3 years into our relationship, and my partner and I had settled into a comfortable rhythm. We weren't perfect, no couple is, but we had built something that felt real. Solid. A foundation I thought could weather any storm. We'd survived a cross-country move, job losses, family drama. We had plans, dreams, a future mapped out in careful conversations over Sunday morning coffee. But there was a weight growing inside me, a heaviness that started as a whisper and grew louder with each passing day. I began to feel suffocated by the life we'd built, trapped in routines that once brought me comfort. I found myself staying late at work, taking the long way home, anything to delay returning to our apartment. I told myself it was just stress, just a phase, just anything but what it really was. The signs were there, but I ignored them. The way my chest would tighten when they messaged to ask when I'd be home. How I'd flinch slightly when they reached for my hand in public. The growing pile of unread books on my nightstand, because I couldn't concentrate on anything beyond the chaos in my head. The panic attacks in bathroom stalls at work that left me gasping for air, clutching the cold porcelain sink until my knuckles turned white. I wish I could say there was a catalyst, a fight, a betrayal, something dramatic and definitive that justified what came next. But there wasn't. Just the slow, quiet realization that I'd built my life around a person I wasn't in love with anymore. And maybe never had been. How do you tell someone that? How do you look into the eyes of a person who loves you completely and say, I've been pretending? I couldn't find the words. So I said nothing. And in that silence, I became someone I didn't recognize. The first lie was small. An innocent fabrication about working late when I was really sitting alone in a coffee shop, 3 blocks from our apartment, trying to remember how to breathe. One lie became 2, became 10, became a parallel life constructed of half-truths and omissions. I created a version of myself that could function, that could smile at dinner parties, and discuss vacation plans, and say I love you too, without hesitation. Meanwhile, the real me was disappearing, fragmented into moments stolen between responsibilities. Late-night drives with no destination. Crying in the shower with the water turned hot enough to burn. Writing unsent letters of confession and deleting them immediately. My partner noticed something was wrong, of course. They'd ask if I was okay, and I'd blame it on work stress or lack of sleep. I became an expert at deflection, at redirecting conversations away from anything that might crack my carefully constructed facade. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, and one honest word would send me plummeting into the abyss. What terrified me most wasn't the thought of hurting them, though that kept me awake at night, but the realization that I was capable of such sustained deception. I had always seen myself as a good person, someone with integrity. Now I wasn't sure who I was anymore. 6 months into this double life, I met someone. It wasn't planned. It wasn't even something I was looking for. Just a random conversation at a work conference that turned into coffee, that turned into texts, that turned into the first genuine laugh I'd had in months. Nothing physical happened, I made sure of that, but something worse did. I felt alive again, and that feeling made what I was doing at home even more unbearable. I began to resent my partner for loving a version of me that no longer existed, for not seeing through the charade, for making it so difficult to walk away. They talked about our future with such certainty, while I was silently dismantling our present piece by piece. The guilt was all-consuming. I lost weight, couldn't sleep, started having nightmares where I was trapped in rapidly shrinking rooms. My closest friend noticed and confronted me one afternoon. You look like you're disappearing, she said. What's going on? I almost told her everything then. Almost. Instead, I said I was just tired and changed the subject. But she was right. I was disappearing. The space between who I pretended to be and who I actually was had become a chasm I didn't know how to bridge. The breakdown, when it finally came, wasn't dramatic. No screaming matches or thrown objects. Just me, sitting on the bathroom floor at 3 a.m., staring at my reflection in the mirror cabinet and not recognizing the hollow-eyed stranger staring back. My partner had fallen asleep hours ago after planning our trip to meet their parents for the holidays. I'd smiled and nodded and helped book the flights, all while feeling like I was suffocating. When they kissed me goodnight, I felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. The numbness that had been my constant companion for months had finally taken everything. Something broke inside me then. I couldn't do this anymore. Not for another day. Not for another hour. The thought of continuing the charade made my body physically revolt. I started shaking uncontrollably, my breath coming in short, painful gasps. My heart pounded so hard, I was certain it would wake my partner in the next room. I pressed my forehead against the cool tile floor and let the tears come. Not the controlled, quiet crying I'd perfected over the past year, but gut-wrenching sobs that tore through my body. Years of suppressed emotion poured out of me like a dam breaking. I cried for the person I'd become, for the relationship I'd damaged beyond repair, for the wasted time, for the hurt I was about to cause. I don't know how long I stayed there, but eventually the bathroom door opened. My partner stood in the doorway, confused and frightened by the sight of me curled into myself on the floor. "What's wrong? Are you sick?" they asked, kneeling beside me. I couldn't look at them. "I can't do this anymore," I whispered, the words scraping my raw throat. "Do what? What's happening?" And then, finally, the truth. "I've been lying to you. To myself. I'm not happy. I haven't been for a long time." The silence that followed was deafening. I forced myself to look up, to witness the pain blooming across their face. Confusion gave way to hurt, gave way to something worse, realization. They saw me, truly saw me, perhaps for the first time in years. "How long?" they asked, their voice barely audible. "I don't know exactly. It happened slowly. I didn't want to hurt you." They laughed then, a hollow sound that cut through me like glass. "So instead you lied." "For months? Years?" I had no defense. Nothing I could say would make this better. So I just nodded, tears streaming down my face. They stood up slowly, like every movement required immense effort. "I don't even know who you are right now." "Neither do I admitted. They left the bathroom without another word. I heard drawers opening and closing, the sound of clothes being thrown into a bag. When I finally found the strength to stand, they were gone. A hastily scribbled note on the kitchen counter said they were going to stay with a friend and would be back tomorrow to talk. The apartment felt cavernous in their absence. I walked through each room, touching surfaces, looking at photos, at the life we'd built together. A life that now felt like an elaborate prop in a play where I'd forgotten all my lines. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Everything was about to change, and it was entirely my fault. The conversation the next day was excruciating. We sat at opposite ends of our couch, the space between us a physical manifestation of the distance I'd created. I told them everything, how I'd felt trapped, how I'd been pretending, how sorry I was for the deception. They listened mostly in silence, occasionally asking questions that cut to the bone with their simplicity. "Were you ever going to tell me if this hadn't happened? Did you ever really love me? How am I supposed to trust anything you say now?" I answered as honestly as I could, but the truth was, I didn't have good answers. I wasn't sure if I would have found the courage to speak up if I hadn't completely fallen apart. I did love them once, but couldn't remember when that had changed. And they were right not to trust me. I had proven myself unworthy of that trust. When it was over, when we cried and talked ourselves into exhaustion, they packed more of their things and left. We agreed they would stay with their friend until we figured out what to do about the apartment, about our shared life, about the debris of what we'd been. The next few weeks passed in a haze of practical matters and crushing guilt. Friends took sides. Some supported me for being honest, finally. Others couldn't forgive the deception. I lost people I cared about, and I deserved to. My family was confused, concerned. "But you seem so happy," my mother said when I called to tell her. I thought they were the one. I started therapy. Not to fix the relationship, that was beyond repair, but to understand how I had become someone capable of such sustained dishonesty. How I had gotten so disconnected from myself that I could live a lie for so long. My therapist asked questions I hadn't allowed myself to consider. About my childhood, my patterns in relationships, my fear of conflict, my tendency to put others' needs before my own until resentment took over. About why I felt I needed to be perfect, to meet everyone's expectations, except my own. You've been performing your entire life, she said during one session. Not just in this relationship. Have you ever asked yourself what you actually want? I hadn't. Not really. I'd been so busy being what everyone else needed me to be that I'd lost all sense of myself in the process. The realization was simultaneously devastating and liberating. Meanwhile, my ex moved out completely. We divided our possessions with painful civility. Books, furniture, kitchen appliances, the physical remnants of our shared life categorized and separated. They left their key on the counter the last day, next to a plant we'd bought together on our first anniversary. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, they said at the door, not unkindly. And I hope someday you're brave enough to be honest from the beginning. I wanted to apologize again, to explain again, but what was the point? Some damage can't be undone with words. Some trust, once broken, can't be rebuilt. So I just nodded and watched them walk away for the last time. That night, alone and in an apartment still haunted by echoes of us, I cried for the last time over what I'd lost, what I'd thrown away, what I'd destroyed. And then I made a promise to myself. Never again would I silence my own truth to maintain someone else's comfort. Never again would I disappear into a relationship until I couldn't find my way back to myself. Rebuilding yourself after breaking apart is not a linear process. There were days when I felt lighter, freer, hopeful about the future. And there were days when the guilt was so overwhelming I could barely get out of bed. When seeing a mutual friend or passing a restaurant we used to frequent would send me spiraling back into shame. I stayed in therapy. Talked until my throat was raw. Cried until there seemed to be no tears left, then found more. Excavated childhood wounds, examined patterns, confronted the parts of myself I'd been running from. I learned that my need to please others stemmed from a childhood where love felt conditional. That my fear of disappointing people had become so powerful, it had overridden my ability to be honest, even with myself. That I had spent so long being who everyone else needed me to be, that I had no idea who I actually was. 6 months after the breakup, I quit my job. It wasn't impulsive. I'd saved enough to take some time off, to figure out what I actually wanted instead of just going through the motions. I moved to a smaller apartment across town, away from the memories, away from the scene of my deception. I started doing things I'd always wanted to try but had put off. Took a pottery class. Went hiking alone. Wrote terrible poetry. Reconnected with old friends who knew me before I lost myself. Spent weekends with my family, rebuilding relationships I'd neglected. Slowly, painfully, I began to reconnect with myself. To trust my own feelings again. To recognize when I was slipping into people-pleasing patterns and stop myself. To say no when I meant no, yes when I meant yes, and I don't know when I wasn't sure. I also had to face the consequences of my actions. I ran into my ex at a mutual friend's birthday party about 8 months after we broke up. They were there with someone new, someone who looked at them with genuine affection, someone who, I hoped, was being honest about who they were and what they wanted. The encounter was awkward but civil. We exchanged polite small talk, then gravitated to opposite sides of the room. Later, as I was leaving, they caught up with me by the door. "You look better," they said simply. "I am," I replied. "I'm sorry for..." They held up a hand to stop me. "I know, you've said it. I've accepted it as much as I can. What's done is done." I nodded, understanding that this was as close to forgiveness as I would get. As I deserved. "Are you happy?" I asked, genuinely wanting to know. They considered the question for a moment. "I'm getting there. It's different, but it's real. That counts for something. It counts for everything," I said. We didn't hug or promise to stay in touch. Some bridges once burned should remain crossed. But as I walked home that night, I felt something shift inside me. Not closure exactly. I don't believe in such neat endings to messy human stories, but a kind of acceptance. Of what I'd done, of who I'd been, of the pain I'd caused. It's been 2 years since the night I broke apart on my bathroom floor. 2 years of therapy, of introspection, of learning to live with the consequences of my choices. 2 years of becoming reacquainted with myself. I'm not the same person I was before. How could I be? The experience hollowed me out, but in that emptiness, I found room for growth, for change, for authenticity. The guilt hasn't completely disappeared. I don't think it ever will. But it's no longer the defining feature of my days. It's more like a scar now, a permanent reminder of a wound that eventually healed. I started dating again, cautiously, made mistakes, set boundaries, walked away when things didn't feel right instead of forcing myself to fit, told the truth even when it was uncomfortable, even when it meant watching someone's disappointment bloom across their face. It was hard, impossibly hard sometimes, but each moment of honesty felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. 6 months ago, I met someone new. It's different from anything I experienced before. Slower, more deliberate, more honest. They know my history, the worst of what I'm capable of. I told them early, not as a confession but as context. This is what I've done. This is what I've learned. This is who I'm trying to be now. I don't know if this relationship will last. I'm trying not to get ahead of myself, not to make promises I can't keep. We're taking it day by day, truth by truth. What I do know is that I'm no longer pretending, no longer performing. When they ask how I'm feeling, I tell them. When I need space, I say so. When I'm happy, truly, genuinely happy, I let myself feel it without waiting for the other shoe to drop. Last week, my therapist asked if I would change what happened if I could. Turn back time, make different choices, avoid causing so much pain. I thought about it for a long time before answering. No, I finally said. I wouldn't. I needed to break apart to put myself back together correctly. I still have moments of doubt, of fear. Times when it would be easier to slip back into old patterns, to be what someone else wants instead of who I actually am. The difference is that now I recognize those moments for what they are. Opportunities to choose differently, to choose myself, to choose truth. My mother called yesterday. During our conversation, she said something that stuck with me. You sound like yourself again. I didn't realize how long it had been since I heard that. I didn't tell her that the person she was hearing wasn't the old me returning, but someone new emerging. Someone who had walked through fire and been forged by it. Someone who understood that the most important relationship I would ever have was with myself. The weight of silence nearly destroyed me. The weight of truth saved me. And in the space between those two realities, I found myself damaged, imperfect, authentic, and finally, mercifully, free.